Hi, Cynthia Allen back with you and excited to join you again today for another little episode, I guess, in what is the Feldenkrais method. In particular, what are these movements about? What are these movements about? So let's see if we can dig into that and help you understand that a little bit better. So my assumption is that you've already tried it, and then you're going, but I don't really understand what we're doing. I don't understand how it works. I know I feel better. I know something's happening, but I'm not quite getting it. And most commonly, when people ask us, what is the Feldenkrais method? Right after the question, they ask, is it yoga? Is it Tai Chi? Is it stretching? Is it physical therapy? Is it occupational therapy? Is it massage therapy? And the answer to all of these is no, that it's not any of those things. So what is the difference? Why is it important? Why is the work important? And why is it maybe important to hang out with it when you're not really quite sure exactly what's happening? So, by the way, you can register yourself in StreamYard. It's like at the bottom of your YouTube or your Facebook message. It takes only a second. And then when you make comments, I will be able to see your name. And that's fabulous for me to make a better connection with you. But even if you don't, you can still make comments and I'll see your comment pop up over here. I just won't see your name. Okay, so this has been a little series that I've been doing. And it's going to be valuable if you haven't been watching the rest of the series to go back and look at the one just 2 days ago on Good Enough Movement. But let's start with the idea of neuroplasticity. So while the word neuroplasticity is somewhat new, I would say mostly really new on the minds of the average American or maybe even average healthcare provider in the last 20, 25 years, perhaps really big even in the last 10. The concept of neuroplasticity goes back quite a way. So the concept of neuroplasticity is that the brain gets better at what it does, and the more repetition it does it, it gets better at doing it. It hardwires in, it grooves in a pattern, a habit, but that you can interrupt that pattern and that habit with new stimulus. And when you do that, the brain is capable of reshaping itself. Now, the science that backs this up is relatively new. The concept is not so much. So the concept goes back even to like William James, and certainly Moshe Feldenkrais had a very fairly robust concept around some of the same ideas related to what science has now shown with neuroplasticity. Also relatively new on the horizon in the understanding of neuroplasticity by science has been that you can continue to reshape and reform the brain even into last months, perhaps, of death, that there's still malleability with the right kinds of stimulus. So it's not really what we used to think in the old days, which was pretty much the brain was kind of more or less done forming and shaping itself in the mid-20s. And, if you had a stroke or something happened to you, you didn't have much opportunity for reshaping, reforming your brain. We now know that's not true. That in fact, you can keep reshaping, reforming your brain for sure. So that's good news, right? Absolutely good news. So in the episode on Good Enough Learning, I talked about the importance of being able to build habits. So this is one piece of neuroplasticity, is that the brain takes in new information, it sorts it and decides what does it want to make into a habit, and through repetition, first it does some variance and exploration. So it makes sure the brain makes sure, hey, I'm not just going to repeat this exactly the same way. In fact, it's not even possible in the beginning. So there's some variance, some variability in the learning cycle. And then after, usually several thousand times, it's grooved in and it becomes a habit. And this is important because we talked about in Good Enough Learning, it's about survival. It's absolutely crucial that we build habits for survival. Now, it's also crucial that we are malleable, that we are responsive, that we don't rely on an outdated habit in a completely new situation. So there is a constant sort of tug of war with the habitual response and then the response to daily living. And we also talked a little bit about in Good Enough Learning that it's a little challenging in an environment where we're now able to structure our world so that we don't have to be very responsive, that the stimulus for continually us to refine and be ready for action in response to the unknown, it's not as great as it would have used to have been, particularly on the physical level. So by the time we're 6 or 7 years old, our habits around walking are pretty much formed for life, and they will only be mostly interrupted if we take up some kind of sort of a hobby, right? A hobby or a profession that relates to walking. So maybe you become a runner, and so gait becomes a particularly important thing. Form around gait becomes a particularly important thing. But most of us actually, that alphabet that led to walking, that leads to running, is the alphabet that is then almost all other movement patterns are built off of. So we don't have really good reasons for re-examining that until we actually have a stimulus such as a trauma, etc. So how is it that we want to make the brain malleable to the new, the body malleable to the new? So the brain, the body, they're all plastic. There's really, your bones are less plastic than other parts of your body, but they still can be changed, and they are changed over months and years. So it's very important to realize that when we talk even about brain plasticity, we're really talking about whole person plasticity, because you're not just a brain walking around on a stick. You are a whole person, of which the brain and the nervous system and all of these cells and electrochemical communications are continually happening throughout the system. So how is it that we could make the brain malleable? How could we make the brain malleable, the body malleable to the new? Well, in the Feldenkrais method, we do this primarily through movement puzzles. Now, this particularly, I think, is brilliant about what Moshe Feldenkrais came up with. So, and this is what makes it so different. This is what makes most of somatic education. So the Feldenkrais method is one aspect of somatic education. It makes it so different from an approach where you're learning a specific form or stretches or routine to do each day to sort of keep you limber. These things do not engage the brain in the new in the same way. They have their place, they are important, but if what you want is to engage the brain in the new, in order to be able to move, think, sense, feel, be different, then you need an approach that the human being was actually designed for. So what is that approach? It is movement puzzles. It's puzzles of any kind, but movement in particular is extremely rich for the human being. Why? Well, it goes back to that whole survival issue. It's the way we move is going to have a tremendous impact, again, on whether we are able to find food, escape from being food, have a choice about our mate. So this is deeply wired in, deeply wired in. And it's a very interesting, always interesting, whether you realize it or not. In the background, your system is constantly going, am I good to go right now? Am I good for surviving in this moment? It's measuring these deep sort of level things around breath and respiration, et cetera. And then it's going straight to, and am I balanced? Am I able to recover? Can I go this way? Can I go that way? Can I go this way? What if something comes out from that direction? It's asking those kinds of questions. And so when you give it food that relates to those kinds of questions, things that it is so always tracking on, it lights up. It goes, hello. There's something interesting going on here. And this something interesting might turn around, right? This movement puzzle, this something interesting might turn around and actually allow me to upgrade my resiliency, my ability to go from moment to moment to moment. So in the Feldenkrais method, these lessons that we work with are not random. They are lessons that the unconscious brain can, largely unconscious brain, the part that's running millions and millions of bits of information every second that you have no idea is happening. That part is paying attention. It goes, okay, I got it. This is about being able to maintain balance. This is about being able to recover balance. This is about being able to take a step. This is about being able to reach. This is about being able to sense and respond within myself. That gets challenging for us because we think that the conscious cognitive part of our brain is all there is, because that's all we're more or less aware of. But it's a tiny amount of the human experience, a tiny amount of the human experience. So, well, what about these movement puzzles? So, well, it turns out that the baby's process of learning and the scientists are not very different. I would say the scientific process is just really an upgrade over the baby's process. Now, the baby is exploring movement mostly unconsciously. It just does it unconsciously. The scientist is hopefully very conscious about the experiments that it chooses. Again, the baby is driven by some underlying instinctual need to accumulate skill. But the process it uses is extraordinarily similar to a scientist. So there is a movement. For the baby, that movement in the beginning may be involuntary, but as soon as it happens, as soon as the stimulus happens, the baby observes. And you've even seen this. Something happens and there's a kind of stillness. What is that? So you give them a bite of something new and there's a kind of stillness. What is that? So they're observing and they're putting in little data points about their experience into their brain, that they're taking in information about how it feels for sure. You know, do I like it? Do I not like it? What kind of results did it give me? Did it get me to be able to reach that toy? Did it elicit a smile from my mom or a frown? Did it elicit a smile from me or a frown? So it's observing. Now, the scientist's process is more methodical because they want to actually do a more like a gold standard kind of thing, right? They're not a case study of one. The baby is a case study of one around its own observations and internal experience. But the process is extraordinarily similar, in my opinion. So we have this possibility of using movement puzzles, right? We go back to moving this idea of movement puzzles. And these movement puzzles are constructed to speak to the brain about things that are important to it around awareness. So things around function, things around regulation, regulation, function, things around relationships, the parts to the self. How does my body move? And truthfully, if a puzzle isn't too boring and it isn't too challenging, most anybody can get hooked by a puzzle. Most anyone can get hooked by a puzzle. Yes, so I'm just saying hi here to Donna and Kathleen, and I'm glad you're enjoying it, Donna. So the brain it's interested, and we're interested in puzzles. We need to be able to solve puzzles in order to be able to survive. Puzzles awaken our curiosity. This is the number one skill Moshe Feldenkrais said everybody needed to survive, and we can really easily see how that would be true. Like I mean, I would imagine we've all kind of wondered these things like, hey, what if tomorrow all of the grid goes away and I'm left to fend for myself somehow off the land, or to figure out how to do things that I've taken for granted now my entire life. I would have to recreate them. That is going to take a tremendous amount of curiosity, a tremendous amount. And the truth is we are not very challenged in our particular life about how to create, about how to really do something new. We have we stand on the generations, right? We stand on the shoulders of so many generations that have made our lives so incredibly simpler than even my life growing up on the farm. And then if I look at my great-grandfather's life growing up on the farm, and the difference between that, oh my gosh, it's just like, it's enormous. And then you compare it to my life now in the city, it's enormous. It's enormous. So we use the Feldenkrais method. We use these movement puzzles, which are utterly fascinating to the subconscious. Your conscious mind may or may not be like buying into it, but your subconscious mind is interested. It is interested for sure. So in our process, in the Feldenkrais method, one thing that's interesting is very much like the baby, you are the scientist. You're the one doing the leading the intervention. You're the subject. You're the one experiencing the intervention. And then you're again the scientist. You're observing the results. And as the scientist, you refine the results. And this is what goes on continually in the Feldenkrais method. If you want a routine to repeat every day, to groove in a pattern of movement habitually, then the Feldenkrais method isn't fabulous for that. But if what you want is to awaken your brain, your body, to new possibilities, then Feldenkrais awareness through movement, Feldenkrais functional integration, but I'm going to concentrate on awareness through movement because it's so accessible online and it works online. Feldenkrais awareness through movement is one of the most intelligent vehicles you will ever get for improving your plasticity throughout your body, in the brain, in the muscles, in the bones, in the regulation systems. It is an intelligent movement system, truly intelligent. I hope, I'm going to wait and see if there is any questions that come up over here in the comments, because I hear some people saying, Nede, super interesting. Budel, love your way of talking about this. Donna, love it. Somebody wrote novelty. I'm going to let you see if you want to ask me any questions before I pop off of here. I don't know that this is a simple way to explain it to someone who's never done it, right? So for people who wrote and said, hey, I want to know how to explain it to someone who's never done it, I have to say that I think the most important thing in that case is to tell your story of how you have been improved and impacted. If you haven't watched that session from yesterday where 4 women talk about surviving and thriving, and all from very different situations, a strong woman who was injured in a competition and a personal trainer, a woman who was looking to move better, and then her husband got very ill, eventually died. She goes straight into COVID. A woman who's been very talented woman, musician, professor, who's been struggling with chronic regional pain syndrome. Another woman who's a yogi, Qigong instructor. They're all talking about their own experience of the method, awareness through movement, and also within your learning body. So Donna says, repetition is the mother of retention, and awareness through movement opens more of its intelligent plasticity. Yes, I think that is absolutely true, Donna. I mean, we are incredible beings. So it's wonderful that we can groove in a habit and make it really deep and reliable for ourselves. But we need both. And when you have a lot of flat surfaces, if we just take just balance, right? If you have all flat surfaces all the time, balance is so impaired by that. I'm thinking about a client who for years struggled with flat feet. This was actually something that was talked about yesterday, struggled with flat feet. And then she had a cabin in Canada where there was pretty good sized rocks. So she would row over in her boat. She would get out on these rocks. She would go to her cabin. She had to navigate these rocks. And every year she came back with huge improvement in the comfort of her feet. Say what, right? Say what? She actually had fallen arches. This is where the bony structure has fallen out of place. So this happens sometimes to women who are in their 50s and they've had a long-standing pattern and they haven't been able to figure it out. These had actually fallen out of place, and she still was getting improvement through this interaction with the challenge of nature that it brought her. So I think absolutely awareness and variation. Somebody on Facebook said, is it better to vary your lessons each day? This is Anna Corinne. Yeah, I think that you can repeat a lesson, once or twice, particularly if it seems complex to you and not easily accessible. But then I would move on and then come back to it, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 months. I wouldn't stay with exactly the same lessons over and over again. This, I think, is a mistake, that some people come to the Feldenkrais method and they get like 6 lessons and they do them the rest of their life. I don't believe they're engaging in the Feldenkrais method anymore. I know they think they are, but I don't believe they are. Yeah. So I think it is very important to make sure you have variety of lessons. And that also, as you go on, it's important to explore some lessons that you would normally not explore, that you would say to yourself right away, I don't want to be in that position. And I always turn off as soon as I realize they're going to work in a position I don't want to work in. You need to do some things with variety while taking care of yourself. Bodil, so you mean that we, through the movement puzzles, reach the unconscious? Do you mean that through the movement puzzles we reach the unconscious brain? Absolutely. We're reaching deep in the regulatory system. We're deep into the limbic, where movement patterns are governed. Yeah, for sure. Let me see. Yeah, I remember to figure out how to use my little system here. So sorry about that. Here's one that says, so interesting. I wonder if the infant has somatic advantage because they don't have the conscious cognitive process available to them yet. I think the answer to that is yes, actually. What happens is that it's natural that we would value that which we are more aware of once that system really comes online. And we don't really have the same level of connection back to the deeper felt senses, and we don't value them as much. Something that I've seen repetitively is people would say to me things like, well, I didn't notice any difference. And I say, well, did you notice, like, for example, how your arm went down longer to the side? Oh, I saw that. I noticed that. I didn't think it was important. So there is definitely a way in which we override. And then what else was in this question? Available to them, and in some ways to interfere with somatic learning. Yeah, that the way the adults do. I don't know if there's any research to support the difference between children and adults. And I'm not saying children or babies are. I'm not suggesting, let me start that wording over. I'm not suggesting that we should return to being babies. I am suggesting, however, that that there is an inborn curiosity. There's an inborn experimental process that we can claim and use to our advantage. Nettie is there an endpoint? When does your body get it? Get what? Get what? Yeah, there's no endpoint, because there's no endpoint to being human. Now, you may decide that you've gotten what you want. So if you have a designed goal around knee pain, around being able to cut a few seconds off of your run, around being able to get up and down from a chair, the floor, around reaching, around not having shoulder pain, and that goes away for you, you may say that's enough, and that's totally fine, right? That's totally fine. But you can also say, hey, I'm in this. I'm a human. I have this thing I can use to keep re-engaging with myself, to keep improving, not just my physical mobility, but my thinking, my sensing, my feeling. I can keep doing that. So that's a decision you get to make. Most people come with a very beginning goal, and I don't know what percentage. I'd say, in my practice, I would say maybe like 50-50-ish, perhaps. I mean, I haven't really ever totally tracked the numbers, but it seems like a good number of people stick with it and continue to explore beyond their initial goal out of the improvements they feel ongoingly, because life keeps happening. They have that saying, shit happens. Well, life keeps happening. And it's not like we don't need to be malleable and responsive and have more than one way to do things. So thanks for that. So this Facebook user says, I have 1 or 2 lessons that I use as a warm-up before competing because they remind something to attend in certain ways, myself maybe to attend in certain ways. That's a fabulous thing. And you're clearly, you're very clear that you're using them as a warm-up. If you are really paying attention to things and asking yourself over and over, could I pay attention to new things today? That can work. I think, however, I will say, and I think that's important what you're doing. You can also use it, by the way, as a way of going, hey, these warm-ups are not going well. These Feldenkrais warm-ups that I've created for myself are not going well. Maybe I'm not going to be able to run as far, do as much today, or maybe I should even not do today because there might be some injury proneness in me. So you can use it that way as well. And I'm going to say that that's a fabulous use for it. And it also probably is not going to continually re-engage your brain and plasticity in quite the same way as doing different varied lessons. So I would think about both of those things. Think about both of those things as a possibility. Let's see here. Yes, Donna says, you mean they don't have as much of something to unlearn? For sure. They don't have much grooved in. Babies don't have much grooved in. So for them, the ability to be interested in what they're sensing and thinking and feeling, and the desire, the drive to form new habits makes it a very different learning field. It just really, if they have a decent environment, and doesn't have to be a perfect environment, it can be a good enough environment. They have a decent environment. They came into the world without a lot of birth trauma or other challenges that might interfere with natural learning process, is they will learn, and they don't need a huge amount of from adults to learn, but they do need at least, to have an established what we call a learning rich environment. They talk about this in science for lab rats. Babies also need a learning rich environment, and so do we. And there's been studies now about this related to long-term care facilities, which are terribly poor learning environments for many situations. So we could get into a whole nother discussion about that. But thanks for that, Donna. Let's see, Kathleen. Repeating lessons, recorded lessons never work as well as attending one-on-one in person, even via Zoom. Perhaps eventually I would become more independent, but at this point I feel very dependent on human contact in real time. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little different for person to person, that this is more maybe style or personality driven. So there are people who seem to motivate themselves very well doing recorded lessons. I don't think necessarily repeated ones. So like in Your Learning Body, I have several hundred lessons that, some people never come to the live classes. They only watch them on replay, or they go into the library and search and find lessons that they're interested in on that day. And it works well for them. We could have a whole conversation about what it means to be in a class with other people, to know that other people are experiencing something like what you're experiencing. This is a pretty deep human need, and it provides a kind of container that a recording will never provide. And also to be witnessed. So the teacher is providing a witnessing function, not a judgmental function, but a witnessing function. They're providing this kind of pacing container. Their presence, even in Zoom, kind of keeps us from completely spacing off, completely going, oh, I think I'll just rush through the rest of this lesson now. It's amazing what the presence of a teacher does for me. So I'm fairly certain it does something similar for a lot of other people. So yeah. So thanks for sharing that. I think it is highly varied, but I've seen more people seem to me to do better with classes as well, Kathleen. Here's from a Facebook user that says, I loved when Mia said in the summit that we improve our movements with ongoing exploration. Right, exactly. I know that was a nice moment. Donna says, I'm in this. Good for you, Donna. I love that. And Bodell, I'm in this, and I'll meet you on June 7th when Bones for Life starts. Okay, you're going to start into Bones for Life. Fabulous. So this actually today, this is such a great set of comments, and what a great audience. I think you like this topic, eh? So Your Learning Body is really what I'm talking about today. You will find Your Learning Body at yourlearningbody.com, yourlearningbody.com. Let me see if I can get back here and let's see how I work these. Let's see how I work these. There we go. So there was Bodhi's comment about I'm in this, yeah. And yourlearningbody.com. I've got that going across the screen for the bottom of you now. It's open for new registrations until Monday, June 1st. Get the date right. Monday, June 1st. It starts a week later. So we need to get you in the door so we can send you a little goodie and get you all set up for the classes. You'll be able to start on Monday nights or Friday mornings. Those times are relative to the New York Eastern Daylight Time Zone. And let's see what here we got from someone who says, I try to think, what type of lesson does my body need today? Can that be a good strategy? Yeah, that's a great question. And it can be a good strategy. It shouldn't be your only strategy. Because that in and of itself can become habitual and thinking that we know what kind of lesson is going to address a problem. And that's not exactly the best way to use the Feldenkrais method. The Feldenkrais method is about pulling in all your resources to help a problem. It's not about focusing on a problem. So what can happen is if you use that strategy every single time, you become more focused around maybe the problem. So you have to kind of, I think, play with that idea in your head a little bit and just ask yourself when you ask yourself, what type of lesson does my body need? What are you really asking yourself? You will also find that by doing lessons in series where a teacher has very methodically constructed a series can be an enormous learning process, as opposed to skipping around through different lessons. It's not that each lesson might not be fabulous, but there is the construction of how the teacher puts together a series can really build on each other in a way that would be hard for you to form for yourself. So this is where the teacher does have some definite value. Oh, good. I'm glad you're going to be in it too, Anna Corinne. That's great. So does it feel like I maybe helped today answer this question? What are these Feldenkrais movements? What are these Feldenkrais movements about anyway? I hope so. I hope it gives you some confidence that you're not just doing something goofball, that was something that's extraordinarily well thought out, well constructed. It absolutely might be one of the best methods out there. I think it is. And I think maybe if we got enough research behind it, we would find that it is one of the best methods out here for actually harnessing the power of neuroplasticity. I don't believe there's that many things available for truly harnessing the power of neuroplasticity. And I hope you have someone that you're studying with. And if you want that to be me, now's the time. If you don't, if now isn't the right time for you, that's okay too. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow. I haven't figured out what time, but I'll go live tomorrow on another topic. I got one somewhere hanging out inside my brain. I'm going to pull it out. We're going to go for it. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.